um, artificial intelligence, um, computer science, and all the multiple disciplines in data science that are associated with AI in healthcare. Now, there is nothing new about artificial intelligence. It's been around for a while and it has evolved over time. Arthur, my slides are not changing any longer. Yeah. So I think there was a time in medicine and in healthcare when auscultation of the heart was done in a very primal way. So after the slides are moving on their own now, can we go back, please? Will you move them or should I? Okay. So apologies for that. And I'm just going to take you through some of the developments in healthcare very briefly, looking at how technology has impacted on how we practice medicine and how we provide healthcare. Can I change my Okay, so apologies for that technological glitch. So let's continue. Um, as I said, artificial intelligence is not new. We've seen technology influence how medicine is practiced over time. Uh, there were times in the early 19th century when medical practitioners had to use their own ears to auscultate the heart. Imagine if we had to do this today. Now, over time, we've seen important developments. Arthur, the slides are not moving. Okay. And we know we had moved from using the ear to a wooden stethoscope by 1816. And then, of course, the stethoscope that we are all familiar with by 1852. To today, when we have AI-powered stethoscopes that can even be used at home. So over time, we can see an evolution in technology that has improved healthcare drastically. I published a piece in the South African Medical Journal earlier this year and used the term specifically augmented intelligence. As much as there is a lot being said about AI and artificial intelligence, it's really important to be clear about what we understand when we talk about artificial intelligence. And so what we are currently working with now is augmented intelligence, because healthcare professionals are still here in human form and are still attending to patients on a regular basis with the assistance of some AI technology or the other. Now, when we speak about artificial general intelligence, that is more in the realm of AI. And there are a number of different definitions that are going around about what we mean by artificial general intelligence. Again, nothing new about this. So Alan Turing in the 1950s already defined AGI as talking to a model that had achieved AGI would be indistinguishable from talking to a human. Today, one could argue that the most advanced large language models have already passed the so-called Turing test. Likewise, John McCarthy, also known as the father of AI, defined artificial intelligence in 1956. And he said, whatever a person can do, he, and I presume she, should be able to make a computer do for him or her. So this is rather a big ask, and it's a big ask if we expect a computer to behave and function exactly like a human. To a large extent, this is because we all know the complexity of the human brain and the nervous system. And so to replicate this in an artificial format is a huge feat. However, huge strides have been made in this direction. We know that in some parts of the world, robotics have been in use for many, many years. In Singapore, for example, since 2015, robotics have been used to deliver medicines to patients, to deliver meals, and to do a number of different tasks to help to make the healthcare system more efficient. Tygerberg Hospital is where our medical school is located in Cape Town, and the Da Vinci robot has been in use in this public hospital for a number of years already. The question is, when we do use AI, does it drastically improve diagnosis and treatment? A number of studies published in international journals show that AI does make a difference, especially in the image-based fields like radiology and dermatology. So this particular study published in Nature in 2017 already showed that when the diagnosis of AI technology was compared to 21 board-certified dermatologists, there was an equivalent outcome. In other words, the AI technology could diagnose dermatological conditions as well as a dermatologist. And to create the database to power this technology, 130,000 images of 2,000 skin diseases had to be fed into the algorithm to assist with this diagnostic capability. Likewise, another study on radiology showed that the diagnostic precision of AI technology in reading chest X-rays exceeded that of radiologists. Where screening is concerned for breast cancer, Mammograms have also been subjected to AI technology. And again, these technological advances have shown in preliminary studies that AI technology is more efficient at reading mammograms for breast cancer than two human technicians. Recently at Stellenbosch University, there is a project ongoing to develop an app that could help detect tuberculosis at an early stage by listening to the cough of a patient with tuberculosis versus one without tuberculosis. And so before the sputum testing occurs, one could use AI in this regard as well. Drug GPT. I'm sure many of you have heard about ChatGPT, but now there's a development called Drug GPT in the UK, where a new AI tool can help doctors in prescription. We know there are many medical errors that occur, many prescription errors that could occur, drug interactions, side effects. And this tool is supposed to be beneficial in reducing medical error in the field of prescribing. More recently, we've seen advanced technology. And here, young people who have had various neurological conditions have been assisted. So this young lady at the age of 30 had a stroke and was unable to communicate. This happened in 2005. 18 years later, technology has helped her. I hope the video works. We'll see. Arthur, shall I just?
I think you are wonderful. Anything is possible.
The BRAVO trial stands for Brain Restoration of Arm and Voice through electrocorticography. The O is from electrocorticography, which is the approach of brain recordings that we use in the BRAVO trial. The overarching goal of the BRAVO trial is to restore speech and communication to people who have lost it. It's also to restore movement and ability to do things like control a robotic arm or a computer cursor. There's been a lot of progress being made in the field by our group and other groups in terms of understanding how the brain works, but also decoding brain activity and trying to tap into neural activity to understand what someone's thinking about or what they're trying to say. And a lot of that actually requires and relies on tools for artificial intelligence or deep learning that didn't really even exist even 5 years ago.
Okay, so in addition to that, I'm sure you've heard about Neuralink and Elon Musk's project, where electrodes are being used to stimulate brain activity in a quadriplegic young patient. This is pretty much a first-in-human trial. And for those of you who follow the media, you will know that the person is able to play a game of chess. Now here, there's quite a bit of mind technology involved and telepathy in terms of moving chess pieces to play the game. So some really out-of-the-box, innovative developments that do, however, carry with them a number of different concerns. So this brain-computer interface technology is something that we need to look out for. I think for academics and for people in various other disciplines, the evolution of generative AI has been something that is quite remarkable. And we've all been hearing about large language models, the archetype being ChatGPT, which was launched in November of 2022. And of course, there are a number of different versions since then, some more advanced, like Bard and Gemini, etc. There are also large multimodal models. And when we talk about large language models, we are usually talking about models that deal with text. But when we start talking about large multimodal models, then we are looking at different media, so video, images, sound, as well as text that could enhance the way people function in a wide variety of disciplines. More recently, there's talk about small language models. So some companies curate their own little language model or generative AI within an organization with the help of OpenAI. And we can talk a little bit more about that later. But I think underlying any discussion of AI is the concept of big data. And this is where a number of ethical issues arise. Petrosino in 2021 famously said, data is the oxygen on which AI depends. And to a large extent, everything about AI is dependent not just on data, but on big data, which is characterized in terms of volume, speed, variety, veracity, value, and variability. So these are not small data sets that we traditionally work with in the context of research, but rather massive data sets. And so we can see that within the discipline of artificial intelligence, there are sub-disciplines that we need to become familiar with: machine learning, deep learning, convoluted neural networks, almost a whole new language that we have to embrace within healthcare, but also within a number of other disciplines. And as exciting as all this is, and as much benefit as it could potentially bring to healthcare, there are a number of potential harms that we need to consider. So data, as we know, and including in healthcare, is inculcated with decades of discrimination. So a number of clinical trials and other research studies that have been conducted over time have bias built into them, and a whole variety of different types of bias. And now that we talk about AI, the importance of algorithmic bias has also surfaced. I think we're all familiar with the pulse oximetry and the bias in terms of race and ethnicity that was built into some forms of pulse oximetry, meaning that patients of color during the COVID pandemic did not access healthcare as quickly as they ought to have. This book by Caroline Criado Perez outlines biases in various different aspects of life, especially where women are concerned. We know that more than 50% of the world population comprises women, yet they remain an invisible part of our population. Many scientific studies on drug responses have been performed on male participants, but the results have been considered valid for women also, assuming that gender does not affect the outcome. And this is termed the Yentl syndrome, also covered in this excellent book on bias. For those of us who have worked in clinical research, we know that even the NIH only in the 1990s started to insist on the inclusion of women and children in various types of clinical research. In February of last year, when ChatGPT had just become world news, we wrote a piece in The Conversation looking at both the benefits and the risks of using this new generative AI. And of course, one of the major concerns raised here was the quality of references produced by ChatGPT. And I'm talking here about the very first version and sort of early versions of generative AI. And the fact that generative AI could manufacture a reference that did not exist. Today, this is largely referred to as a hallucination. But one has to really see these references to believe them in terms of the extent to which ChatGPT is able to pick out authors, to pick out people who work together, over time in a specific area, and to put them together as co-authors on a piece, to find a topic that these people have written about previously, but to engineer a topic that sounds credible, to place it in a journal that is potentially somewhere these people have published in, and of course to use the wrong year of publication and other details. So it is absolutely fascinating to see how ChatGPT can actually manufacture references, which is a huge threat to healthcare, especially where we practice evidence-based medicine, and where it is critically important that the science is robust and the evidence we find is reliable and believable. Now, a number of issues arise where ChatGPT and other generative AI models are concerned, especially if we are feeding documents into these AI tools. And I think many people have started off doing this without thinking. So the excitement of the new technology resulted in people feeding a whole range of their documents into ChatGPT. And when we do this, we're actually giving that information and that intellectual property to OpenAI. Now, we all know about academic institutions and how strict they are when it comes to intellectual property and who owns the intellectual property. We are also very mindful of privacy concerns, especially in South Africa, having the POPI Act. So you can imagine the implications of people indiscriminately feeding research proposals, articles that are supposed to be reviewed by journals, who knows, maybe even protocols submitted to a research ethics committee into ChatGPT to get ChatGPT to do the hard work in terms of reviewing. We know that many journals have already got rules about what you may and may not do, and you certainly may not feed an article for review into generative AI, and especially not ChatGPT. There are many questions about data and how we deal with de-identified data, anonymized data, or pseudonymized data, especially as we move into large data sets, which so easily could be de-anonymized. I mean, we need only 3 to 4 data points from anyone to de-anonymize. And yet we continue in our research protocols to promise participants that their data will be anonymized. And research ethics committees continue to accept this as part of a consent form. So huge implications going forward in terms of healthcare and health research. Now, with new technology, there are important concepts to consider. Technical debt is one, and ethical debt is another. And technical debt is the price we pay when our technology is not adequately developed. And we've already seen numerous examples with generative AI where technologically things have gone horribly wrong. Where ethical debt is concerned, we know that this can occur when AI tools are created and deployed without fully examining and addressing the potential ethical consequences. The example I gave earlier of people feeding documents into ChatGPT is such an example of ethical debt. In some cases, one would violate the scientific misconduct policy, the scientific integrity policy of an institution by so doing. And in other cases, the consequences could be even more severe. So this piece by Petrosino explains ethical debt in much more detail. So, given the risks and the benefits, regulation of AI is critical. The World Health Organization has started developing a whole series of guidances on AI, as well as generative AI. And they have highlighted a number of important principles that need to be considered. So consent and confidentiality. Of course, we know that in healthcare, if we are taking data from electronic health records, as well as research projects using AI, that how we deal with consent and confidentiality are going to be incredibly important. I think safety is always a concern in healthcare, and irrespective of what technology we develop, safety sits at the heart of any new technology that we expose our patients to. Of course, do no harm is the basis of healthcare practice. What is really concerning is the black box phenomenon and the fact that many people do not understand data or AI, and many aspects of AI are not explainable, not intelligible to most, and therefore not transparent. And so there needs to be an incredible drive for public consultation and debate in order to work through some of these ethics principles. Patients in healthcare institutions may or may not be aware that their health data collected in the clinical scenario is being used for research. Of course, responsibility and accountability are basic to all these ethics principles, and the need for regulatory frameworks is important. We have seen a number of different frameworks developed by UNESCO, by the World Health Organization, and by various other bodies. and developers of such AI technologies need to be held accountable for negative impacts. Where low and middle income countries are concerned, we're always lagging behind in terms of access to technology. And so as things currently stand, there is a significant digital divide between high and low income settings. We also spoke earlier about bias and how this will fuel inequity even further. And of course, how will benefit sharing occur in the context of big data research and AI? Of course, we need any new technology to be both responsible and sustainable and energy efficient. So impact on the environment where AI is concerned is really important. There is concern about job loss in the context of technology. And so training in big data and AI is really important to promote responsible, sustainable AI. There is also an AI Bill of Rights where regulation and regulatory frameworks are concerned. And they're all pretty similar in the principles that they espouse. But here I'll just highlight human alternatives. So when we are faced with healthcare technology, for example, robotic surgery, patients need to be given the alternative of having a human surgeon if they so wish. And that's part of the consent process and really important. Where the laws are concerned, and we are not going to deal with the laws in this session today in much detail, except to mention the EU AI Act, which is really, one of the biggest and first pieces of legislation globally where AI is concerned. What is interesting about this piece of law is that there are different rules for AI technology that carry different risk levels. And where generative AI and the ChatGPT world is concerned, what is important is transparency. So many people are using ChatGPT, and there are good ways of using it and bad ways of using it. But what is important is that there is always disclosure. So I'm not sure if academics in the room or online are aware of whether their masters and PhD students are using generative AI and whether or not they are disclosing how they are using generative AI. We know that for many scientific journals, there is a requirement to declare use of generative AI and exactly how one has used it in producing a piece of scientific work. Of course, making sure that models do not generate illegal content. Hallucinations would be part of that, and that there are summaries of copyrighted data used for training. And of course, that's the big issue, is that where does all this data come from? The big AI models that we have today, where did that data come from? Who sought copyright clearance and IP issues related to that? So that's really important. An interesting piece in Nature Medicine published in June last year discusses how model AI chatbots, large language model AI chatbots, will require approval as medical devices if used in healthcare. So a lot more about regulation ought to follow, with the Food and Drug Administration in the US also becoming actively involved in regulating AI technology. Needless to say, any form of AI technology, the type that we have today, will disrupt what we know as the traditional doctor-patient relationship and will make us all think differently in terms of how we embrace this technology. Now, large language models are amazing. We've all done Google searches. And I think if we compare the energy efficiency of a Google search to large language models, it becomes clear that large language models have a very large carbon footprint and drain the environment in terms of both energy and water. So the carbon footprint of AI technology is something that we need to take very, very seriously. Many of the large companies have plotted their use of water, especially the very big data centers, storing and processing huge volumes of data, are also guzzling up large volumes of water. Now, as we head towards the future, I think we're going to have one day a scenario of seeing our grandchildren and great-grandchildren perhaps knowing how to code from a very early stage in their lives. The world is moving in a different direction. I think something that many of us did not really anticipate, but it is here and it is here to stay, and it is going to get more exciting, more concerning, and we need to find solutions to embrace it. So I'm going to thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Kamantri. So I think what we'll do is we'll go on to the second presentation, so we can take both sets of questions together. And I see, Emma, you've made it. Sounds as though you had a rather horrible trip out here, so thank you for being with us. We really do appreciate it. And if you can take over that microphone, then I can introduce you.
Oh, I sent them. But I brought them on a sticky shot. So what's that? Email it. Do you want? Shall I get my stick?
Right, so while they sort out the technical issues, Emma Rotkamp-Bloem is an AI ethics advisor, philosopher of science and technology, a logician, and machine ethics researcher. She is head of philosophy at the University of Pretoria, a member of the UN Secretary General's high-level advisory body on AI, and chair of UNESCO's World Commission on the Ethics of Scientific Knowledge and Technology, or COMEST. She is associate editor of the Journal of Science and Engineering Ethics and full member of the prestigious International Academy for the Philosophy of Science. She serves on various AI ethics and governance advisory boards internationally, including the Expert Advisory Board of the Global Commission on Responsible AI in the Military Domain and the Global Academic Network and the Center for AI and Digital Policy in Washington, D.C.
Are we just finding it? For some reason, I have hundreds of. I can give you hundreds of talks, but just trying to find the right one. What you did. Yeah. Thanks. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, online and in person. Apologies for a bit of disruption. That is due to the lovely connection between Pretoria and Johannesburg, which we all love and hate. Whatever you feel, there's some emotion around it. So my talk will be more general than the little last bit of Kamantri's great talk that I heard. And I'm going to dare to challenge you a bit on the first day after the Easter break. But I'm a philosopher, and I want you to think about, and Kevin asked me a little bit, so I took your directions maybe too literally, but there it is. Talk about the why of AI ethics. Why is it that we have to think about AI ethics? What is the use of it? Is it just an irritating obstacle to innovation? It's stuff that philosophers thought up to give themselves some kind of validation. What is it about? So that's more or less what I'm going to try to challenge you to think with me about. So let me just see if I can move this. Is it not, no, can't? Okay, never mind. Can you just move this thing a little bit so that I can see my full? So first I'm going to say a few things about AI, and those of you who are AI specialists, please, think of what you're going to have for dinner tonight. But I think it is important that everybody just understands a little bit about AI technology and what it is about AI technology that makes us worry so much. What is it that makes it so special? And then I'll say a few words about the main ethical concerns, and you'll see that the ethical concerns at issue here have to do with social and political concerns. AI ethics is not about reams of principles and rules. It's not a simple normative ethics. It is something far more complex than that because of the nature of the concerns that are raised. And then I'll say something about the connection between AI ethics, AI governance, and sustainable AI, because that's what we all want. We want technology that can just move, that can bring the benefits that we know that AI technology can bring to us, but without harm and without being stopped with all the court cases that OpenAI, for instance, is facing now. And, it makes for good entertainment, in fact. So why care about AI ethics? There are good reasons, bad reasons, and ugly reasons to care about. The good reason simply is that we know that AI technology has the potential to benefit humankind in all of humankind's aspects, from food security to transport, to healthcare, to education, to surveillance, the good kind, if there is such a kind of surveillance. And I'll say a bit more about the good in a minute in a different slide. The bad, that's the core. It has the potential to amplify inequality, to threaten social and political stability. With misinformation now, as you all know, there are huge concerns. It's the biggest election year almost in the history of democracies around the world, and we don't know what people will end up believing. The quality and integrity of information, that obviously goes hand in hand with that. Privacy and the right to mental integrity means that you have the right not to be manipulated. You have the right to figure out for yourself what it is that you want to do and why. And then threats to the environment and ecosystems, as Kaymantri already mentioned. The ugly is simply the business model. Big tech has a business model that is simply based on the commodification of personal data for profit. And what does profit mean? It rests on power. So it also relates to keeping certain, not all, certain geopolitical power blocks in place, firmly in place. So if we think that AI was developed for the good of humankind, yes, maybe in the beginning in the 1950s, the logic-based AI, the old style AI. If you read John McCarthy, one of the fathers of AI, you will see that it was always intended to benefit. But one has to be commonsensical about what is happening at the moment. So a few words about the kind of AI that we are dealing with now. I'm not going to read everything that's on the slides or anything. The slides are there for you to look at while I just pick up one or two things. So the kind of AI that we are dealing with is data-driven AI. And that means that we deal with a technology that can leverage massive amounts of data in ways that humans simply cannot do, generate predictions and decisions in ways and at speeds that humans cannot do. But those decisions and predictions have real-world direct impact on all aspects of what it means to be human. What is machine learning? It's an AI method that develops outcomes through models that can learn from data patterns that it learns to recognize, and that from there, based on that, it generates decisions. Okay, so learning refers to an algorithm's ability to update weights in a statistical calculation in order to optimize for the most useful prediction in that context. And I'm saying these things, I'm saying statistical calculation, because algorithms do not understand
ChatGPT doesn't know that a student is stressed to hand in an assignment and is concerned about the student, even though in the beginning it spoke to students and to its users in the first person. It doesn't know what the hell is going on, okay? So it's following certain mathematical rules. And we see it everywhere, as you all know now, speech and facial recognition, financial risk management, and so on. So people talk about algorithms and models. A model is just the computational expression of an algorithm. And an algorithm is an encoded way in which to turn input data into output data in a particular way. With machine learning, in the old times, we knew how the algorithm was going to change the input to the output. Now we don't. Okay? We don't know exactly how it's going to do it. And the most important part is, or no fact of all of this that we have to keep in mind, is that this process changes humans into data points. Okay? So we become objects that are simply used to have for the algorithm to go through its motions. Generative AI is the new kid on the block. It's been in the making for quite a number of years. It's new because the public now became aware of it at the end of 2022, but obviously it didn't fall from the sky. But it's different because where in the past it was about observing and categorizing, now it is also about creating. But you have to define creating, because if, you know, rather than just classify an image as an image of a horse, it's asked to generate a new image of a horse. It's a generalized image from what it was trained on. So define new. Okay, so we have to really think about this before we get caught up in all the hype. So the rest of the slide is simply to tell you, again, these are about computational steps that are taken. It's used in different environments. Natural language processing is just one, computer vision is another one. But if we just quickly look at what happens in NLP, so the algorithm is prepared by examining all text in a particular aspect of the online world. So we know that ChatGPT was trained until at the end of 2021, on the internet until the end of 2021. And then the algorithm tries to computationally identify what the relations are between words, between sentences, between paragraphs. And then it creates a mathematical model of these relations, and it establishes a computational network to help it navigate the relations. So when you put in a prompt in ChatGPT, in natural language processing, it's like ChatGPT application, what happens is the algorithm simply looks at the words and sentences, considers the words and the sentences, and decides based on the computational network what the most probable next word or sentence should be. It does not understand the question. It is not creating new scientific knowledge. And we can have a fight about it afterwards, but that's my view, okay? So general benefits of AI, coming to the point, here's a whole list. But if you look at the list, you will also see that is almost for every point, there's a flip side to it. You can link a concern to the benefit. It is a wonderful technology. We are in a brave new world, as Kay Mantri said. We cannot shy away from it. It will be stupid to do so. But if we embrace it unreservedly, without thinking, we get into trouble. So concerns, I've given some around human control, human agency, and the right to mental integrity. I've basically mentioned all of the ones at the top, but there are also specific harms. There is what is called representation harm and allocation harm. These were identified by Kate Crawford. And so representation harm has to do, it's a subtle kind of harm, and has to do with structural bias in data. It has to do with entrenching stereotypes based on certain kinds of identity prejudice. And it's not, only racial or age determined or gender. There can be lots of different kinds of structural bias, but it is based on some form of identity prejudice. And because this kind of mathematics latches onto patterns, it can latch onto the wrong pattern. And then the flip side of this is another kind of representation harm is if you are part of a vulnerable group and you don't exist in the data set. Then you're almost discriminated against by definition. But just going and putting everybody into data sets is also not necessarily the way to go because it brings its own problems, especially with minority groups. But okay, so that's the one kind. The other kind is allocation harm. That's a more immediate, in-your-face harm. It's you will not get a financial loan if you are a Black female under 30. Because if they look at historical data, you will not be able to pay back your loan. What kind of historical data has this algorithm been trained on? You have the right to ask that question. But so that allocation harm has to do with simply excluding some people from the how to distribute certain resources. And this goes also for access to education, access to certain kinds of healthcare. As we know, getting a job, AI is everywhere. And then the last kind of harm is, again, a kind of subtle harm, and I won't talk a lot about it because then I'll just run out of time. But we have to be very much aware of the fact when people say technology is neutral, of course not. Because technology is how humans interact with it. It becomes what humans make of it. So the mathematics may be objective, but the way in which humans interact with the technology ensures that the outcomes are not necessarily neutral or objective. And so a very simple, it's a really low level example, but it will take the least time to explain it. If you think of Alexa, the default is that Alexa has a female voice. So what is the message? That females can be given orders and they should do it fast. So yes, we can say, you take it too far. Okay, there's a whole big literature on that, okay? So it is very much to do with how humans mediate their world through technology, and the kind of technology determines how that mediation pans out. Okay, what is AI ethics? The actual story that I want to tell you tonight. So these are typical AI ethics principles that you will find in most pieces of AI regulation. And I'm not going to take you through the regulation because you'll be dead in 2 minutes, okay? All of it is online. You can go and read the UN bodies, our interim report that came out in December. There will be a new one coming out in June, August, if all things go well. You can read the UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of AI. You can go and read the European AI Act. So that's not what I'm here for. But just to give you an idea, these are the kinds of principles that we look at, and you're welcome to ask me in question time what these things mean. Okay? Okay, Montreal already took you very elegantly through the new consensual principles that the WHO identified in their guidelines to how to interact with generative AI in healthcare. But this is just to give you another kind of example. But now, what I want to ask you is to help me to consider what AI ethics is. What kind of a beast is it? Is it a normative ethics? Well, it does formulate criteria for moral action. It does do that. Okay, but it's also an applied ethics because it definitely considers how people should interact with the technology in real world cases. It is very much about real world application. But it is also has aspects of meta ethics because it asks questions about whether moral standards are culturally relative. You think about all the now the world wakes up to the fact that they've been excluding the global south in their conversations on regulation of AI. Questions come up in discussions about what the values, where the values come from, and what the readiness of different nations are to implement these or to actualize these values. So these kinds of questions that we ask in, and also just what is virtue? Does it differ from culture to culture, from state to state, from, you know, is it also an economic thing? What is it? So all of these things are aspects or dimensions, nuances of AI ethics. So is AI ethics about principles and values? Yeah, it is. But if it's only principles and values, run as fast as you can, because it's useless. The tech world doesn't know what the hell you're talking about, because they have not been trained to concern themselves about moral consequences, and rightly so. It's not their job. What we need is some kind of mechanism to translate the values and principles into policy actions. And there the UNESCO recommendation is the best example. I have a vested interest in saying that, but still, it is really a very good example. Is AI ethics a technical problem? Well, yes, it is, but it isn't only a technical problem. If we leave it to the tech community with all love to them, we also may be in trouble, because they have to build methodologies to check algorithms for fairness, for transparency, for explainability. And those are all concepts that have meaning in the social sciences and the humanities. So you need to understand what is fairness. It isn't just including one person from each data set. It is something completely different from that. So it's a technical, it can be addressed by the tech community to some extent, but not in isolation. Is it a governance issue? Of course it is. It informs governance. So it is about sharing best practices. It is about ethics impact assessment, but it's not only about that. AI ethics is a human ethics. We are not regulating technology. We are regulating humans that research, design, develop, deploy, use, and decide not to use this technology. That is what we are doing. And I think it's important to get the focus right. And I'm going to try and do it in the next 5 minutes by challenging you a bit. So I hope you have your second wind now. So I'm going to, I think it's really important if you want to ask, we want to try and understand what kind of a beast AI ethics is, we have to think about agency and autonomy. Because ethics is about always finding the best, the right thing to do in a particular context. And it isn't simply about dead lists of rules and regulations. It can't be. So if we think in terms of agency, you hear many people saying, so how long will we still be able to take our own decisions? AI is taking our decisions for us. Have we ever really been able to take our own decisions? Let's be honest. And even if your answer is yes, are the decisions that we take fantastic? I don't know. Look at the world. It's not in a good place, I would say. And it's because of human decisions. So whatever your responses to these questions are, there's a fact of the matter that governments have a duty to ensure that their citizens live in the kind of environment in which they have the potential, at least the chance, the opportunity to build a life that they can value, a dignified life. And I want to put it to you that AI ethics is working to find the answer to what this would translate to in a world in which we live with AI. And I'm going to latch onto 2 pieces of philosophy to do this, but it's not deep philosophy. There's lots of examples of agency erosion and AI. Here's just a few. There's lots of examples of AI human rights violations in terms of agency and autonomy. And I'm going to define to you now what I mean by agency and autonomy. So we know that there are issues around this. Why do I latch onto this? Because it is core to what it means to be human, to realize your full potential, to self-determine for your own reasons in your own way. I get so confused between the laptop and the clicker. So the first thing that I'm going to take a little bit from is Isaiah Berlin's notion of these 2 notions of liberty. Negative liberty pertains more to individuals. So it is about the absence of obstacles and barriers, and constraints. So one is free if no one is stopping one from doing whatever it is that one wants to do. Positive liberty is the interesting one, and that's the one that actually plays out in terms of societies. And this is about the presence of control in the presence of constraints. There are regulations that organize society to some extent. So the challenge is how to be free enough to comply with some of the constraints, but in such a way that you know why it is that you do it, not because you're forced to do it. Okay? So in that sense, autonomy then means that individuals choose to act freely to maximize their well-being on the basis of reasons that they understand and endorse without manipulation, such that the agency allows them to actualize their positive liberty in authentic ways. Okay, what the hell? So how can we do this? How do I link this to AI ethics? I do that by taking a bit from the capability approach to welfare, to human welfare. This is an approach in philosophy that focuses on how to realize the potential of humans to achieve lives that they value. So it's not, there's no prescription. It's not, this is the only life that you can value. It's open, but they need the means. And the means are capabilities. So the intuition that grounds this notion of capabilities is the intuition of a dignified human life, whereby people have the capability to pursue their conception of the good in cooperation with others. So capabilities are then a combination of processes and tools and skills and behaviors and organization that enables humans to live lives of meaning and value. And they align with agency in enabling individuals to make reasoned choices and act accordingly. So I need this kind of tool, I need this kind of skill because this is my aim, this will be my life of value, this is where I'm going to. While autonomy implies an adequate level of competence, implying that individuals use opportunities to maximize their freedom to, in fact, decide what it is that will lead them to attain a life of well-being on their terms. So if we then now move back to AI ethics, in every society, to make the final link, each person has an entitlement to all possible combinations of goods and services to which they have access so that they can actualize these goods and services, these capabilities to build their own life of well-being. And Nussbaum sees these capabilities as political entitlements that impose duties on governments. So it's a government's duty to ensure that they satisfy the need for certain capabilities as political entitlements. So in the AI context, what kind of entitlements are we talking about that would allow humans the agency and autonomy to achieve dignified lives of well-being in tandem with AI technology? So AI ethics for me is a dynamic system of values. It's not a list of do's and don'ts. If it is, as I said, run fast. It's a dynamic system of values, and these values should be interpreted as ethical entitlements that place duties not only on governments, but on all AI actors, the researchers, the designers, the developers, the deployers, the users. So in this sense, then AI ethics, the role of AI ethics is to enable humans to become the best that they can be, to ensure technology society interplay, and to safeguard the integrity of AI innovation and the sustainability of AI innovation. So to recap, last 3 slides, okay, I'm almost there. AI actors have duties imposed on them through ethical entitlements of citizens to achieve lives they value. So the positive argument for AI ethics then becomes that sustainable AI relies on the translation of ethical values and principles as entitlements or capabilities into positive duties that will actively prevent harm and support human agency and autonomy. Let me give you a practical example before you die of all the abstract concepts. AI ethics translates and actualizes human entitlements such as the right to browse. To realize their agency, their positive liberty, for instance, to decide whether you want to sign a consent letter or not. Do you want to give your data to your doctor, or don't you want to give your data to your doctor? You have the right to say yes or no. In terms, so you realize this agency in terms of positive actions that other AI actors have to fulfill. And that is drawing up the consent letter in the first place, having consideration for third-party sharing, giving some kind of, pronouncement on how you can access your own data. And in this way, AI ethics allows AI technology to realize its fundamental purpose, if we want to be positive about its fundamental purpose being for to benefit humanity, by taking control of the potential of AI technology's processes to ensure the best possible outcome for humans. So it's a way to translate the principles into actions. And it's not only in terms of actions for governments. If we wait for governments, we're in trouble. So in conclusion, the core of AI ethics I put to you, and you are very welcome to differ from me, is to ensure that the socio-technical arrangements of our society are such that they strengthen human agency and enable humans to live dignified lives that they value. AI values and principles as ethical entitlements should empower humans to self-determine and realize their fundamental purpose in their interaction with AI technology. This can be achieved if AI ethics is a positive ethics that safeguards, ensures, and actualizes agency as the right to positive liberty and autonomy in terms of ensuring there is an environment in which AI actors can take up their positive duties to ensure this possibility for people to have access to the capabilities that they need to build a life of value in tandem with AI technology. So why AI ethics? The answer to this question has to do with the why of AI ethics. The what is principles and values. The how is the technical approaches. But what is the why? So the why, from my point of view, is that it's a human ethics, that it's there to safeguard and to ensure flourishing of humans in tandem, next to, in engagement with this technology. So it is an enabler of AI governance and of international law, and it ultimately ensures sustainable AI, because sustainable AI is AI that is trusted. It's technology that is trusted. This kind of technology, the way in which it works, means that its full benefits will only be realized if it's fully adopted. It will only be fully adopted if it's trusted. So it is worthwhile to think about how to regulate this technology, because in the end, it saves a lot of trouble. So it is an enabler of AI governance, not as a competitor or as an add-on. It's not in competition with human rights law, standards, and principles. I know there's a whole section of the wall, that is, lobbying for this view, and is very much against this kind of approach, or the ethics approaches, which I think is misguided, because AI ethics ensures that human rights violations are prevented through placing positive duties on all AI actors to empower humans to live lives of well-being. It can never be in competition to or against human rights law, but it has its ear on the ground. So in this way, it's our constant ally and our companion, and right through the life cycle. Okay, not just in the design phase, not just at the end with ethical impact assessments. Yeah, I've ticked all these boxes, nobody died, everything's fine. That's not what AI ethics is about. It's right through, it's in every part, the research, design, development, deployment, use, end of use. It should be everywhere. It should be turning the principles into active duties. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks. I think take a seat. We'll see what questions come through, and I'll bring a microphone to you if you need to answer individually. Right. I think what we'll do is we'll just take a few questions from the floor physically, while this will give me a little bit of time while you're dealing with those to have a look at the ones in the Q&A. So any questions or comments?
Thank you very much. And I was online first of all, and then I came in person. Wondering if part of the 467, we have AI bots there, and if they're going to count in terms of attendance. My question or my comment is born not out of very in-depth knowledge of AI. I'm here in the room because I'm wanting to know more. I mean, it's the reality that we're in as academics and as physicians and as human beings. As you were presenting on, and this is to you, Emma, I was thinking about my father. He's 84, ill or recovering from an illness. Thinking of people in community who eventually become maybe the participants in a study, and wondering where is their voice, where is their agency. Yes, I imagine like an ethics document will say we're going to possibly there'll be part of the analysis or something will come through with data, but how protected are the very vulnerable in society when we start speaking AI ethics away from the conversation, obviously, of the divide that is becoming more and more obvious in terms of people who are yet to have access to available technology like smartphones and smart wristwatches and things like that. Um, and that divide is increasing more as we introduce this. I don't know if my question or my comment makes sense. Thank you. Anastasia.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and thank you for that example, because my own mother is 87 and she's been in and out of hospital for the past month after a very bad fall. And yeah, I've also had to think in those terms about her and who is protecting her rights and her data. And where is it that she's asked about decisions that are taken about her, and especially, you know, how it is, you know, and when we are dealing with older people, sometimes older persons, their agency is not even recognized always anymore, except perhaps in the community where they come from. So I think my answer to your question is, and that is something that the whole world is guilty of, one of the core capabilities to ensure living a life of well-being and to have some kind of protection if you are part of the most vulnerable groups is AI literacy. We have, it's the food for AI ethics. And it's the only thing that will in the end make people adhere to legislation. If people really understand why it is that we have to govern this interface with how we interface with this technology. It's not just that we have to, it's why we have to do it. And there are, you know, I hear of so many community endeavors, but in South Africa, we're a little bit slow, but some of it is happening. But they are in Uganda and in Rwanda, they have an ambassador project, for instance, where graduate students from computer science and philosophy departments go into the rural communities to explain to people, not just AI, but the whole digital world. To sit down with them respectfully and explain why it is that they need to concern themselves about this. And that's the way to do it, bottom up. That's why I always get so excited about it's not top-down rules and regulations. It must come from the bottom up, but then we need to ensure that the capabilities are there.
I think one of the challenges we've always had in healthcare has been related to patients' capacity to consent, the understanding of information, of health information, which is just complex enough as it is. And now we need to add on data literacy. And how are people going to understand what is happening to their health data and where it's going? So as a part of our project on big data and AI, an arm of the project involves looking at stakeholder engagement and development of tools to improve data literacy. So we've started developing posters that can go up in a hospital, pamphlets explaining data use in healthcare, as well as little educational videos, so that people, it's not, usually when we speak about research, we speak about community engagement. So engaging with specific communities relating to the disease under study. But where data is concerned and where AI is concerned, it's a public engagement. It requires us to start, engaging with the public at large. And as in healthcare, we haven't done very well when it comes to engaging with our patients and communities and to educating and to co-creating knowledge with our patients. But going forward, as we enter into the world of big data and AI, I think the obligation on us as healthcare providers is going to be even bigger in terms of ensuring that we're on the same page when we have these important discussions. Kevin?
Thank you for very stimulating talks. I'm also here to learn. From my perspective, I was just wondering, out of your experiences, how does one, it's the animal ethics and the human ethics that we are familiar with. It's nice and easy to tell the practitioners who takes responsibility. It's not so easy to remind people or encourage people or to inform people that you make use of AI, you are the responsible and accountable person. How does one actually promote that amongst 1,000, 18, 19, 20-year-olds?
I think that is the challenge we face in academia as things stand, because so our students are using generative AI, whether we know it or not, whether we like it or not. And there, as I said, there are good ways of using AI in academia. But I think, and in many other fields, but I think where we differ in academia is that we are often expected to be people who create new knowledge, to generate new ideas. As doctoral candidates, we expect our PhD students, to make a unique contribution. And Emma said earlier that with AI and generative AI, the creative element is contentious. AI will spit out what's been fed into it. And sometimes there's a time limit to what has been fed into it as well. And for many of us who look at AI generated text, it's fairly average. You can almost identify AI generated text by reading it. There are a few pointers out there. Some people say if the Oxford comma is used too often or indiscriminately, that's a telltale sign. The use of however, moreover, lots of commas, Latin roots. We can pick this up. And if you know your field fairly well in academia, you know what is an average essay or what is an average thesis. And so you can pick it up as well. But I think we have not had sufficient conversations with our students within academia to highlight some of these important considerations around responsibility and accountability. So to ban generative AI in academia is not a good idea. But to ensure that there is proper policy in place to guide our students is important. And then, of course, for us as academics and healthcare providers to have conversations around, how much value we are going to place on a thesis or a dissertation that is written by AI. We need to start analyzing the last 2 years since generative AI came about and look at, have the number of cum laude students increased in the last year or two? Because that is a trend one tends to pick up sometimes in a graduation ceremony. Do we need to go back and review these submissions over the past year and a half to see who's been writing them, who's getting the credit? What happens when we graduate these students, some of them cum laude, and they have to then take on jobs based on what their new employer has seen in their academic transcript. So there's a lot of responsibilities that are lying here with academic institutions, with students, with teachers. I think we all, need to collectively promote responsibility and accountability.
I'll try to be fast because that was a really good answer. I think we should take it as a challenge. And the best way to do it is to teach students critical computational skills. And what critical AI refers to is that you simply take the time to find examples where, for instance, ChatGPT or any of the other applications generated content that has certain, say, for instance, racial implications. And you ask students to analyze the answer, to evaluate the answer to the prompt that was given, and to look for anything that makes them uncomfortable and to tell you why. So what we need to have, and it's not just, of course, not just racial tension, it is anything that is contained, it is simply misinformation in many cases, things that are made up. It's not that ChatGPT is a bad little boy that sits and wants to be mischievous or something. It's simply how the mathematics works. And sometimes the probability is a little bit off. It's just how it is. It doesn't really go and make up stuff, but it does, kind of. So you have to give examples to students. You can't just tell them that it happens because they think we're idiots. We are old. We don't know what the hell we're talking about. We want to stop them from doing well because we want them to suffer in the way that we suffered. And so it's really not the best way to approach them, to talk about how bad it is, start talking about how bad it is, because it is good, because it can hone their thinking skills. It can help to make them better citizens, but you should also not say that to them because I think that's boring. But you should just confront them with some of these outcomes and ask them to go and sit and to write a paragraph on about how it makes them feel, which means we all in our universities need a discipline called critical AI or whatever grabs your mind. But we need time to do this with our students. We can't just take one lecture out of 14 lectures in which you have to teach them, 2,000 years of philosophy. That's not how it can't work like that. But it should be taught in the right way. It should be interactive. It should, a lot of thinking should go into it. Otherwise, we'll do more harm than good. And just one word on coding. That's what makes me very angry when I'm proud that there are certain schools in South Africa where students will be taught to code at primary school level. I'm proud of it, but I'm also very much taken aback because those students all want to become Elon Musk. They want to get rich and they want to rule the world because that's what it means to code. It gives you power. So I think it's dangerous to teach coding in a vacuum. They should be taught to code in tandem with critical computational, I don't know what to call it, AI, but digital skills, critical digital skills. So they must become AI ethics literate, not just AI literate. So, lots of work, a lot of challenges, and students mostly think, as I said, that there's something wrong with us, but it's fine. We must just pick up the challenge and find ways to get to them because it's worthwhile, I think.
And just one more thought here is that I think academic institutions sit with a serious ethical dilemma. They have the pressure to produce graduates, master's students, doctoral students for whom they receive government subsidies. And we know that academic institutions across the country are all instituting financial constraints in terms of their expenditure. We know there's a financial crisis in academia. And here is an opportunity to generate large numbers of graduates because generative AI is going to help them to do this. At the same time, these institutions have to exercise their responsibility and follow the principles of scientific integrity and ensure that they're just not churning out people and pieces of work that are generative AI, pieces of knowledge that are being added to the literature. So we have our master's and doctoral dissertations being passed, marked by external examiners, some of whom may be retired, some of whom may not be aware of ChatGPT and generative AI and the role that it is playing. And so we get these master's and doctoral dissertations passed. But of course, when we move to publication, the real risk starts there, because this is where journals and reviewers may pick up fake references, large portions of text that may be plagiarized from generative AI. So I think generative AI to academic institutions is both a potential benefit, but also a massive risk. Thanks.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions from the Q&A. Two, I think, go quite well together. What are the research gaps or needs when it comes to ensuring the ethics of AI? And what is a useful and ethical way for us to use AI in our role as researchers?
Okay, I think the research gap is simply on how to actualize AI ethics. Unfortunately, it started out as just lists and lists of principles and values, and philosophers went crazy. I'm a philosopher, and sometimes we misbehave. We like abstract concepts and things, but they are useless if we don't take care to say how they impact the real world. Philosophers are the gatekeepers of society and of humanity, but if you take that role seriously, you have to take responsibility for what you do. So how to concretize, how to come to this way of bottom up that I talked about, how to be a data activist, how to ensure that success is not only defined only in terms of performance, but can only also be defined in terms of how does the community whose data has been used to train this algorithm benefit from their data being used. So there is not enough research on that. There's not enough research on how to disrupt our concepts and the way in which we approach ethical problems. And that is what is needed. But to do that, you need researchers who are willing to become at least knowledgeable in the field that they are not knowledgeable in. So philosophers should know something about what AI technology is. You shouldn't be able to train a model necessarily, but you should understand what is happening. And the tech community should understand that what they understand under inclusivity and fairness and explainability is not what the rest of the world probably understands with that. So transdisciplinarity, it's a buzzword. All universities are going crazy with that word. Nobody knows what the hell they mean by it, I think. It's time that we figure it out. There's also not enough research done on that. And the other one, what was the other one? The second one, I might have answered it already. Or useful and ethical way for us to use it. Okay. use it to hone, use it as a sparring partner. If you're talking about generative AI, if you have a conversation with a human in a train or a taxi or at a party, you don't necessarily expect the human to react completely rationally and understand everything that you want them to understand about your argument, but you still learn something from just articulating your argument. So think of ChatGPT as a kind of tired, drunk new friend that you meet at a party. Don't think of it as the answer because it's mathematics. Then you can actually learn a lot from it. And of course, you can use it in many other more, there's lots of sophisticated ways in which you can also use it. It does help to summarize, but you must always, the researcher must always be in control. The researcher is the knower. Then you can use it for lots of different, it's useful. But you need to understand what it is and how to use it as a tool. It's a tool. It's not the wisest person on earth. Thank you.
So one of the things you pick up a lot in the literature is the fact that we've gotten used to trusting computers in a different way. We think that they can't get it wrong unless we've somehow given it the wrong data to work with, or we've made a mistake. But with generative AI, in fact, we don't have that certainty at all. And so it is something we have to think about, but we tend to rely on machines because we think they're more reliable, and we may not have grounds for doing that. So one of my fears is the fact that we don't always understand the risks, because the risks change from minute to minute. How ChatGPT handles one question now may be different half an hour from now. So I can't tell you what the risks are up front. And so it's just a whole new area for us to open our minds to. I want to get at least 2 more questions in from our guests online, and then we will need to wrap up because I don't like to keep people longer than we've asked them to be here. I saw one that I thought was quite interesting here. One of my concerns is that AI in health will follow in the footsteps of social media, where you pretty much sign away all of your rights and inadvertently become a source of data in order to participate on these platforms. How can we protect ourselves and patients against this kind of bullying, for a lack of a better word? Why do they always ask us all the how-to questions?
So it's not easy. I mean, whenever I ask an audience about whether they had consented for their cell phone data to be used, people say no. But everyone's forgotten that when you buy your cell phone, you sign everything away in the terms and conditions in the small print. Yeah. So we've consented to this already. Obviously, there are ways in which you can control your settings on your mobile devices and ensure that you're not signing everything away. But it's challenging. And as I said earlier, we have patients in hospitals whose electronic health data is being collected, stored, and possibly shared for research purposes. But the patients don't know this. And so it's really important that we start at that level, that hospitals, the public healthcare system, the private healthcare system, that everyone ensures that we improve data literacy of our patients, and that people are aware of what is happening with their data. And so that we can all start to try to better protect, our own data. We are told our cell phones are listening to us all the time, and when we have a conversation and we go into our phones a little bit later, we get all kinds of suggestions about where to buy a coffee machine, that we were having a conversation about. So how do our phones know? So there's one level at which we sometimes think perhaps we will have no control over our data, that it is already out there and you cannot put the champagne back in the bottle, And then on the other hand, there's a strong need for us to all become more literate, more aware, and to see how we can protect whatever privacy we have left to protect. So it's not an easy game to play. And I think we're all entering into this new digital era and the world of AI. And it's about, having these conversations. And I don't think we're talking enough about generative AI amongst ourselves as academics, with our students, with friends and family, and with the public in general. So just a lot more discussion, conversation, and education that still needs to happen.
Because I'm not in healthcare, as you know. And I'm glad that I'm not facing the challenges that you are facing. But I think also what would be wonderful is if we get the healthcare sector, the private sector and the public sector to put out challenges, to say that, to show their patients, show the public that they are aware of the fact that people feel threatened and that they are aware of the fact that patients have rights. So, I always think of the Mum Connect app. I don't know if you know that this app, this is an app that was developed for pregnant and new mothers in areas where there isn't direct access to a clinic or whatever the case might be. And it just sends out suggestions, like in the first trimester, you should typically be looking out for this, and this is what you should do after the baby is born. The baby should, be be able to do this or that at this level, or whatever the case might be. But so why isn't the computer science students being challenged in a kind of a hackathon way to build an app that will inform patients what their rights are in terms of their health data? I am being asked to sign, this is an operation, this is an orthopedic thing. So then you have a category and you go there. We have brilliant students in South Africa. Why don't we incentivize something like that? Help the student, build a startup. I don't know. Your team can probably do it, Kaimantri, or you probably have, knowing you. But, I really think that we should also show it should come from both sides. It can't just be us saying we need literacy, we need literacy. If there is something that comes also from the medical side, it will also instill trust in patients, because they would know that they have their best interests at heart. Do they have their best interests at heart? They will have to prove it. So just a suggestion. I hope somebody reaches this.
So there's a lot of talk and a lot of competition between academic institutions at the moment to be sort of the leaders in the use of AI and out there at, what is it, the leading edge of the global south. We have a particular inside joke about that, but anyway. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that there's this exciting potential. But I think one thing that people in the medical world have learned is you have to think about the ethics at the same time as you're developing your technologies. And so when CRISPR came out, immediately it was the medical people themselves who said, this is dangerous stuff. We need to call the ethicists in, and we need to sit down and we need to work out how we're going to regulate this. And what worries me is that we're hearing so much talk about being at the leading edge of AI, but no one's talking about being at the leading edge of AI leadership, technology, education, and ethics and governance. And I think we should be looking at those. So the universities who's going to take the real lead here is the one that is going to take the lead both ethically as well as scientifically. And Emma, we know you're doing great work with it, and you're doing great work with it. We'll do our bit to continue here. But obviously, this is a conversation that we're going to be having for a long time to come yet. Thank you so much to both of you. It's been such a pleasure listening to you today again. And haven't seen anything like enough of you lately. But it's been good to share with you this evening. And thank you so much for your time. Travel well back to Pretoria. I hope there aren't any incidents this time. And you'll be traveling back to Cape Town tomorrow. Thank you so much for being here with us all. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to the Steve Biko team and to our Arthur, our IT guy, and to the Center for its support of this event. Thanks.